Welcome, Mike Richards, to Sustainability in the Sea.
Hi, Carissa. Thanks you for inviting
Yeah,
me on here. It's exciting.
I'm so excited to talk about what an environmental gap year means today, but I want to share with our listeners how we know each other because I feel like that was one of the best experiences of my life. I think it was 2 years ago now. Hey,
Yes,
yeah,
it was, what do they call it when, serendipity. There you go.
serendipity. Yes.
Serendipity, right?
For those listening, you may have heard me talk about Abby Richards, my friend from EcoTalk, who is a misinformation and disinformation researcher. She's amazing. Everyone should go follow her. She really brings to light the ways that social media algorithms can control narratives and how we perceive things. Well, Mike and her are family. And when I connected with Abby first time in person, she was like, "You got to meet my uncle." And he's he's doing amazing work with bringing people and connecting them to nature. And so fast forward, then I ended up joining your science camps program last summer as a guest speaker on Hawaiʻi Island, on Big Island in Hilo. And meeting the students that came to that camp was so inspiring for me just to really feel like, wow, this next generation has such deep understanding. And then I learned that you've been operating those camp programs for years, haven't you?
Yes, and you're right. And it's every summer I get so renewed. It's like all year long, my optimism drops. Then I go to camp and boom, I'm like, let's go.
Let's go. Yeah, they all came in with like different interests as well. And so when
Hmm.
I learned about Mike's new endeavor to help offer more environmental education through a gap year program that we're going to talk about today, and that's what this episode is going to be about, I knew I had to have him on because I knew FutureSwell supporters and Sustainability in the Sea listeners would really benefit from hearing an opportunity like this. I had never heard of an environmental gap year before we grabbed coffee a few months ago. So, without further ado, let's get into it. Welcome to Sustainability in the Sea. Before we get into the environmental gap year program, what is your relationship with being an educator and why did you start creating these life changing programs for early career students?
It's a long story, and you probably don't want to hear the whole thing, but
No,
I'll
give it to
try
us.
I'll try and give the short version, right? So, I was not in science or environmentalism. I was a software guy. We wrote business applications, and I had my own business, and I did that for 30 years. And in the course of that, I started up a couple different businesses, and I thought of myself as an entrepreneur. And when I sold my business, I was like, "All right, what am I going to go do next? Right? Something exciting, I'll make, lots of money, whatever." Anyway, I get on the phone, I call the man who helped me start my business. And even before that, he was my mentor for 10 or
Mhm.
15 years in my 20s and early 30s. And I call him up and I'm like, "Mick, I sold the company. It's fantastic. I'm so excited." Dead silence on the other end of the phone
Oh no.
for like 30 seconds. And I'm like, "What's wrong? What's the matter?" And then he says, "That's great, Mike. Now go do something good."
Mm,
And it like those words just hit me like a 2x4. And I'm like, "All right, so much for making money. Now I got to go do something that is good."
yeah.
Right. So I said, I started a thing, I've always been interested in science. And one of the first things I did is I enrolled in school. I went back to school, taking whatever science classes I could. And I'm like, well, I could be a scientist and go to school for like 100 years. And then I'll have about 5 years before that I'm still capable of doing any science. And that's not going to do the world much good.
Hmm.
So that's when I kind of the light went on and I said, "You know what? Why don't you just try and make a whole bunch of other scientists and engineers and environmentalists and conservationists?" And that's why I put a group together and we started the nonprofit Science Camps of America about 12 years ago now.
Hmm.
And that's what we've been doing.
Is it for high school students?
Yes, the science camps are for high school students, and now we're starting this new GAP program, which is going to be for high school graduates
Oh,
or
amazing.
people who are, want to take a semester or a year off somewhere during their college career.
I feel like when I think of a gap year, I'm not sure how other people feel about this, but I think of like widespread travel. I think of doing a work trade in another country. I think of the very few people in my high school that went and backpacked around Europe. What what is a gap year?
Well, that's a really good question. And it's not the Gap Year Association defines it as intentional time off
Mm,
used to better yourself. I'm paraphrasing their definition, but
yeah,
basically it has to be intentional and the purpose has to be to in some way better yourself for your future,
yeah.
right? And that's intentional that you're doing that. So that takes off, just taking off a year to work and make money.
Hmm.
Yes, a lot of people do that, but I wouldn't classify that as a gap year, right? Um, and a lot of people just do how can I have a great fun experience, do the backpack across Europe or in India or tour, Pacific Islands. There are many, many different programs that are like that. There's also a tremendous number of GAP programs that are purely academic. So you actually just go to enroll in a different college for a semester, and maybe you would come to the University of Hawaii and be part of the MOP program, Marine Option Program that
Hmm.
they have there. And you could take those credits back to your school, wherever you came from. So there's a lot of those types of programs as well. But those are essentially just going away to college somewhere else
Hmm.
for a semester. Not to disparage them. I think they're fantastic opportunities, especially if your university doesn't offer, you go to the University of Iowa and you want to study, learn something about the ocean and can spend a semester in Hawaii.
Yeah,
That's a really good thing, right?
yeah.
So,
Yeah,
um,
I think that also as someone who always wanted to take a gap year, but it wasn't available to me or encouraged, I feel like it's a kind of a lot that we put on 17-year-olds to decide what they want to do for the rest of their lives. And especially after being in
yeah,
a classroom setting where we've been kind of told we've had to ask what to for approval and permission for things like our whole life in schooling, and then they're like, choose your entire major. And I think it's really important to normalize that it takes time to figure out where you fit. You can change your mind, of course, but it does take that time and intentionality, and I love that that's what gap years provide.
yes, absolutely. And I'm like the poster boy for that. So, I after high school, I went to a good college, on a nice scholarship, and I had no idea what I wanted to study.
Mm-hmm.
And the entire year was, I went to classes, I did my homework, it was okay, but it was entirely waste of time and I didn't like it because I
Yeah.
realized there was no goal, there was no aim, there was no like something that said, okay, you got to reach this step and then the next step and then the next step. I
Mm-hmm.
just listen, you did an interview with Andrew Levin,
Yes. Oh, I love him. He
right?
runs How to Protect the
And
Ocean, that podcast.
yes, and ever since your podcast, I listen to him like he publishes 3 times a week or something
Yeah,
like that.
he is
So I
amazing.
listen to all his podcasts now. He's on my daily list. And he
Ugh.
just had an episode about how you might have a goal. I want to be a marine biologist,
Mhm,
but you got to break it down into the individual steps.
mhm.
And that's why I love podcasts. There's so many smart people, and everyone you listen to, you know, they turn you on to some other smart people out there. And then you listen to them and they turn you on to someone,
I know.
really smart.
I
It's just amazing.
I didn't just start listening to them until COVID, and I feel like it's great because you can be like, I want to check out, I
Me
want to
too.
learn something, I want to be inspired, I want to like just be entertained, and I love that about podcasts. And he's great for anyone listening. Andrew Lewin has a lot about how to protect the ocean. He's been doing this for like 15 years, so it's
Yeah.
amazing. But so Something when we talked about this amazing program that you're building and that people can sign up for right now and learn more about at hawaiigap.org, I'll put it in the show notes, is um, it's an environmental gap year, which means it's
Right.
tailored to folks that love nature, love it, or interested in an environmental field, which is so broad. And it takes place in Hilo, in Hawaii, Big Island. So, what is an environmental gap year, and how is it different than the gap years that you kind of just described that have been primarily the offerings when people Google what a gap year options are available to them?
Sure. So we took a lot of time and had a lot of discussions with people to figure out what we were going to offer for a program. And we ended up with this program, which we've entitled Environmental Leadership.
Mm.
And what it came down to is that we believe whatever you want to do in environmentalism, and in my opinion, every single career in the world should just bring a measure of environmentalism into it, and we'll go
I
long ways to
agree.
solve the problem, right? Whether it's
Mm-hmm.
fishing, farming, you know, YouTube videos, I mean, whatever your career is, we need lawyers, we need engineers, we need scientists, we need divers, we need, everything.
Yeah.
So, but you need a few things to be an environment to do that, a few skills, if you will. Number one is you have to understand how scientists collect and analyze and review and publish information, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
you don't have to be the scientist. You don't have to write, do the research, do the papers, but you have to understand what makes one scientist be listened to, and what makes other people go, no, this guy's wrong about this, right? It's not
Right.
just opinion, right? It's scientific rigor, a system that exists, and you have to have an understanding of that.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, you don't understand this, you know, you're going to fall for conspiracy theories and everything else that's out
Right.
there if you don't think scientifically.
Mm-hmm.
The second thing is the other foundation you need is you have to be able to communicate well. So, in virtually, if you were going into rocket science, you don't have to sell anybody on the idea of rocket science, right? Everybody loves rocket science, right? Oh,
Mm-hmm.
who wouldn't want to be in rocket science? So, but when you talk about something like, I'm going to clean carbon out of the atmosphere, right? Then you not only have to say, okay, I've come up with a method for doing that, then you have to convince people that it's worth doing, right? And that you can do it. So you have to be able to communicate,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's every sense of communication. So communication skills are um, essential, because whether you're talking about social media, right, creating TikTok videos about the environment, what does Abby do that makes her so successful in her presentations, her social media work, or you on your podcast, or Andrew Lowen, like you were talking about.
Yeah.
So, so there's social media, there's traditional media, there's how journalists cover scientific issues. There's, of course, writing about it, long form, right, and so forth, books and magazine articles and things like that. So you have to be able to communicate. It's an essential skill. And learning how at the GAP program, we hope that people will have basically a 10-week opportunity to look at all these different communications methods and talk about it. Why is this post a good post? Why does this post have 30,000 views and this one has 3 million views? Why
Mm-hmm.
does this one have 100? Right? And give them the chance to analyze those things and learn from it. So
Yeah.
that's the second foundation. And the third is leadership skills, right? I've always looked at leadership skills as an amplifier for your guitar, right? It just makes everything you do louder, stronger, more exciting, more, you've got not just you doing it, but you've amplified your message. You've amplified your work
Mm-hmm.
by being a leader. So that's what we want to do at GAP. The GAP program is focus on those foundations, foundational skills, I should say. And all our skills you could really use in any field to some extent. But we then go and take where we study is really important. So the kind of curriculum we've come up with is all of the different ecosystems that are on the island, and there's basically 9 that I've identified, which works out well because it's a 10-week class, right? So each week we'll focus on a different ecosystem. We'll look at the structure, the flora, the fauna, and then we'll take a look at the environmental threats. And more importantly, we're going to look at these solutions that are being proposed or implemented. And we'll go to places around the island, right? We'll take field trips to each ecosystem. We'll do some type of field work out there. We'll join organizations that might be working on coral restoration or sea turtle habitat things. Or there's a forestry company I've been talking to up in Pu'ua'a. So it's, there's just tons of those organizations and places to do on the Big Island that we'll be taking them.
First of all, that sounds amazing. I wish I could go back and take this program when I was 18 years old. I really
you can come and be the leader.
Oh, that would be such an honor. I love how much intention you've given to those 3 pillars, because I started in science and knowledge discovery. And when I segued over to communications, I had no formal experience or skill building in communications. I just knew I was kind of an extrovert and was always like a social butterfly growing up. And I also knew I loved social media. And so I was like, I think I can figure this out, because I knew it was one of those like natural skills that I had, but it had to be cultivated and curated. And I had to do all of this internal foundational learnings about marketing and science communications that if I had done a program like this, I would have at least had that foundation. And the other piece of this program that I think is really appealing is the fact that they get to dive in to the leadership skills that are going to be needed, because we see the environmental challenges evolving so quickly. 5 years ago, coral restoration wasn't even a thing really in Hawaii. And so we need to actually build environmentalists that can be adaptable and innovative. And that means like the things that you maybe learned in school might not be anything that you're even close to working on when you get a job. And so to have the leadership skills allows you to be like, oh, wait, I can apply what I learned in this specific topic to this new emerging need to protect our planet. And
that's a really good point.
Yeah. I mean, the leadership is difficult to cultivate too. I mean, what types of projects and experiences would students get a chance to do?
Well, we intend to have a lot of both individual and group projects that they do throughout the course of the 10 weeks. So we'll give each of them, we'll have opportunities to be the leader of group projects. That's one way they're going to be learning it. Another way they're going to be learning it is through basically looking at and meeting leaders. So if you go to an organization, say that's doing coral restoration, and then they meet the founder, the person who's doing that work, that is a chance, they will talk about the leadership. How did they quit their day job? I can talk to Alex. How did you get the nerve to quit your day job and do your own this full time? This stuff, right? I mean, that's a leadership lesson.
Yeah, it is.
Right. And you look around and there's so many people who can teach that kind of stuff, right? There's in every way. I mean, you can go to a farm and find a farmer who's, a leader in the community of farmers that's around him, right? And so that's what we intend to do is get them with people who are leaders. Another project of the GAP program that we're doing is the dates of our program basically coincided almost exactly with the dates of the Hawaii state legislature. So
January to May.
So it's the 1st of February to middle of April is where we go from February 3rd to April 13th. So
of 2025,
we're going
right?
to 2025. Yeah.
Perfect.
So we will take a look at all the environmental bills that are proposed before the legislature throughout the course of the semester, and we'll follow what, as they work their way through committees. The state's pretty good about putting all that information online. So
Mhm.
you can follow it even though we're not on the same island. But I do hope to also meet with some of the representatives who do live on Hawaii Island and have them talk about it. And the kids meet them face to face and have the chance. So I think that's another huge lesson for the GAP program. And it gives them a chance to say, let's look at this bill and now let's analyze it. Let's say, what are the unintended consequences of this bill, right? Or what are the objections to it? And are they legitimate?
Yeah.
Or is the science behind this proposal just designed to, make somebody money? I mean, that's what we want to have them look at in a very critical way, and participate as well, right? They can write letters to the representatives and make phone calls and do,
Yes.
hold signs up on the side of the road. I don't know what we'll have them do, but
Well,
participation is part of the plan. Yeah.
and they're going to leave understanding. I mean, don't get me wrong, we all watched that video about how a bill becomes a law, but I forgot all of that. And then when I got back into advocacy in my mid-20s, I had to learn entirely what testimony even means beyond calling or emailing your representatives. And so for them to have that foundational knowledge of how to participate, maybe it looks different in the state where they're going to spend most of their career, but they will understand the tools and they'll have the tools to participate in environmental policy, which is, I mean, how passionate I am about that.
Right. But it'll be interesting. I think, you look not only at what goes on at the legislature, but what does the newspaper say about these issues? What letters to the editor are coming in, right? I
Right.
don't know that we'll open the comments section, but we'll look at the letters to the editor
The comment sections are always scary.
anyway.
So for folks interested in this, I mean, we're in October right now. It's going to start in January. It's 4 months. It's based on Hawaii Island. What do people need to do if they're really interested in applying right now?
Okay, well, the program actually starts February 3rd
Mm-hmm.
and runs through April 13th. So it's 10 weeks exactly. And to apply, they can go to our website, which is hawaiigap.org, and just scroll. It's just basically just a few pages, but just scroll down the main page until you hit the apply now button. And
Amazing.
that's how they can apply. So it's for ages 17 to 22. And they can come from anywhere in the world, right? There's
Mm-hmm.
no restrictions on that. We just ask they should have graduated from high school or the equivalent, and be ready for the time of their lives, I hope.
Yes. Yes. And accommodations are covered for the program, right? So people will be building friendships for a lifetime.
Yes, I hope so. I mean, you're going to put all the participants sharing a house along with their leaders. And part of the things we've talked about is, the self-governing process. So the participants will decide for themselves, how often do we go shopping? Are we cooking together? Are we cooking separately? Are we, what meals will we do? What are our rules on cleaning and all this stuff? And so that's a big part of the first week, is just taking time to go through each of these different things and letting them come to decisions about how they want to manage those things. And
Wow. There's
I think that too will be a good learning experience for people to have the chance to do that.
Yeah, there's gonna be so much self-growth in that process of learning how to be a roommate, connecting with nature, seeing a place like Hawaii maybe for the first time, exploring how policy works, exploring how communications work, and also really being able to ask those questions in a setting that allows a lot of freedom, which I really respect about the program too. It sounds like, once again, just sounds like something that you will leave with so much more clarity around what you want to do with this beautiful treasure that is your early 20s.
That's what we're hoping, is that people who come to this, they know they want to do something environmentalism. They're not quite ready to jump in with that, like I said, that first, second, third, fourth step all mapped out to reach their goal. this hopefully will give them a better idea and exposure to a lot of different things. And
Mhm.
on top of that, it's Hawaii, it's the Big Island. There's, hiking and biking and kayaking and surfing and swimming and snorkeling and all that fun stuff, right?
Yeah.
So,
I know it's the living laboratory, right? That's going to be surrounding these students while they're learning is going to be unmatched.
I'll tell you, it gets down to the what you alluded to earlier, which was people learning in an informal or experiential way as opposed to in a formal way. And they both have their place. One's not
Mhm.
better than the other. And depending on the student, it may be right for you, it may not be right for you. But think about this. Every doctor you've ever seen had an experiential education. They call it an internship and a residency,
Mhm.
right? Because that's how people learn, right? And that's how they gain enthusiasm. I'll tell you a story. So one of the first classes I took was at Windward Community College was geology, the geology of the Hawaiian Islands, to be specific. And I would go to class. Every class was exactly the same.
Mhm.
There was me and one other guy who listened to the professor, and everybody else in this classroom just looked at their screen all day long, all classes long. So I was like, this is terrible, right? But then we went on a field trip to the Big Island with the whole class. And everybody came alive. They were interested. They were asking questions. They were like, licking rocks and all the crazy things that geologists do, right? But it just woke me up to how you have to, how different an experiential educational experience is to compare it to just hearing about it or watching a video
Yeah.
and they all, like I said, they all have their place.
Mhm.
I'm sure my connection to the ocean began because my mom insisted there was one TV show we never missed week after week, which was a Jacques Cousteau special,
Wow.
right? So I grew up, far from water or far from the ocean, and that was my early connection to it.
Yeah.
So
There's so
it's
many
kind of fun.
different ways to connect folks to it, but I mean, I believe that this type of experiential in nature learning, it's going to allow students to follow their own curiosities around these issues. And I love that it's only 10 weeks, but it's getting into so many extremely important topics over the 10 weeks. And so if students have a whole year off, maybe they can spend the other half of their year working or traveling, and then they get to learn and explore their passion for environmentalism through this program. So thank you for bringing
That's
it
what
to
we
the
hope.
world.
Well, it's not me alone, but yes.
Yes.
One of the things I'm excited about is we've asked a bunch of people to join what we call our advisory council. People and you are one of them and
Mhm.
have agreed to do that. My niece Abby is one.
Yay.
We have there a few people. There's like 6 or 8 of people who have volunteered to do that. And what we envision is that they are going to be there for the participants as resources. Not that I'm going to tie up all your time, Carissa, I promise.
Yeah.
But
Mentors.
maybe if someone, let's say, and again, much of it is going to be self-directed. So what each student pursues and studies in depth is going to be what interests them, right? We're not going to
Mhm.
say, okay, this week you got to study coral reefs till they're coming out of your eyeballs, and maybe you can't stand being in the water, right?
Right.
It's right. So if I got someone who has said, my passion is ocean conservation, the first thing I'm going to do is say, well, meet Carissa,
Yeah.
right? And let you share your knowledge, your expertise, not every day, not every, but from time to time to just be a voice in their head, just kind of help them stay focused on that interest. And
Yeah.
again, for them to learn, is this something I'm really interested in, or is it just something that, I saw when I was 16 and kind of latched onto it, right?
Right. And something I also really appreciate about it, that mentorship element is so important. It would be such a gift to talk to students in this program. But like also, like you talked about at the beginning of this episode, is that environmentalism can be embedded in any career. And so if students are like, oh, I was kind of going to go down the business track anyway, or I was going to go down the law track anyway, this GAP program is still so beneficial for them because it will give that perspective and lens as they build maybe a career that might not be entirely dedicated to environmentalism.
You never know, right? We have we've had many kids come to science camp, our science camp over the years who are, they arrive, I'm going to be a doctor. Mm-hmm. And it's funny how some kids just have that
assurance,
that thing. And I think maybe someone will come to this, you know, how can they'll come to this GAP program and they're determined they want to be a doctor. But maybe 50 years from now, or 20 years from now, they'll figure out a way to reduce hospital waste by 10%, right? And because they've learned to bring environmentalism into their career as a surgeon or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So that's what we can hope for, right?
Yeah.
Is to get the kids, students who just use this, whatever career they have, and think about the environment.
Yeah. Well, we finish every episode with the same question, but because of the nature of this episode, I'm going to, I think, tailor yours a little bit. So we normally ask, if you could put a message on a billboard that all the most powerful people in the world could see, what would it be? But this time I'm going to say, if you could put a message on a billboard that all of the young leaders that are finishing high school could see, what would that message be?
Can I have one for each group?
Sure. Sure.
Yeah. Okay. For young people, it's really for everyone too. But it would be think long term. I believe one of my things is people are so short. We think only of the next weeks or months, and you know, and we should be thinking and planning and designing our cities and our farms and our fisheries for 20, 30, 50 years of otherwise we'll never be sustainable, right? If we just keep thinking of how do I get enough fish to eat this week, we're not going to have any fish left in 50 years or 20 years. I mean, so we have to think long term. So that's one of my billboards says think long term.
Great.
Okay, I get another billboard, right?
Yeah, you get two. You're the first guest to ever negotiate with me. So that means I like you, Mike.
I know. I feel very special. It would say this. It would say include the environmental cost. So we sell everything as cheap as we can, and we don't include what it costs the environment in that product. If we did, everything would cost more.
Right.
Which, as a parent, I don't want to have to see my kids have to spend more money. That's hard. But it will also reduce consumption, and it will encourage us to say, what are the things we can buy that have the least environmental costs? So if you built the true cost of fuel and plastic and extraction into these products, then I think we would have we'd be able to control a lot of the world a lot better.
Yeah.
So
imagine if, I mean, we live in Hawaii, right? It's like, imagine if the local produce was actually cheaper. Like, how much easier could we get if versus the imports being like subsidized, you know? And so,
right.
Yeah, we absolutely need to be factoring that in, and it hasn't been historically. So that's a great one too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So 2 big wishes.
2 big wishes. Well, thank you so much for coming on Sustainability in the Sea. I'm going to put all of the information about the GAP program in the show notes. And we're also going to have a few social media posts out with some more information, but really all of it can be found on the website, and you can apply right now. If you listen to this, you're inspired, you want to be considered as one of the few slots for 2025, you can apply. So awesome. Thanks for
Thank you,
listening.
Carissa.
Yeah, have a beautiful day, Mike.